Yo, what's going on, guys? Chris Warner here, Overtime Athletes. So for today's video, what I want to discuss was strength development in athletes. And where this video came about was I was actually talking to one of my athletes the other day about how much strength is enough for athletes. And what he did was he showed me an Instagram post of a particular coach that basically was advocating for training maximal strength year round, and why he trains maximal strength year round. And I figured, since he asked me that, it's something that I could share with you guys. Now, just to clarify, I'm not saying I disagree or agree with the coach. There's only one little blip. I'm not able to see his entire approach or process. And at the end of the day, if you're getting results, what does it really matter? What does my opinion even matter? But I figured, I could share my insight to strength development in athletes, because I know I tend to be on the side of, not lifting or not placing such an emphasis on actual brute absolute strength. And it's actually not the truth. It's just that I don't feature a lot of it. So first and foremost, when we're talking about strength development in athletes, it's important to understand obviously the difference between absolute versus relative, where absolute is the maximum amount of resistance that you're overcoming, where relative is that resistance divided by your body weight, right? Like, how strong are you in comparison to your body weight? This is important because you could start to see what numbers an athlete you could start to break down what numbers would be suffice or a standard for athletes depending on what level they play and what sport, right? So the biggest thing in strength development that I often tell guys, and I try to get their mind wrapped around, is if we have these training sessions and we have these plethora of tools and resources at our disposal, which ones are going to give us the most bang for our buck to get that athlete better at their sport, right? Everything that we do as strength and conditioning coaches is to amplify what they're doing in their actual competition. Now, if they're a power lifter, obviously their sport is lifting maximal weight, so we want to achieve that. But if they're a football player, right, and I get these weight room warriors a lot, and they're, squatting out the gym just outrageous numbers, but their broad jump and vertical jump are extremely low, why would I spend a lot of time on absolute strength with that particular athlete? If I have an hour, I'm not going to spend 30, 45 minutes on building up his deadlift and squat. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on transferring over that absolute strength to more relative strength. So it's not so much that we don't focus on absolute strength. We're always going to touch on our compound lifts, your under fives, right? Your fours, your threes, your twos, and occasionally your ones with the right athlete. But the biggest thing is that you got to realize is, just like the deadlift, just like plyometrics, just like speed training, these are all tools to be able to support the athlete in getting better at their actual sport. So when you're programming and you're putting in these bits and pieces, you have to understand what the athlete you're working with and what their actual needs are. But to get into a standard as to what I actually look at as a coach, now you obviously know predominantly I'm working with team sport athletes, your basketball, football, baseball, occasional soccer, sports like this. So I do look at a series of standards as far as what strength is suffice enough. Now that doesn't mean that once they get to a certain point, we don't need to train absolute strength anymore. All that means is I know if we get inside a certain range for a particular lift, I can then begin to focus on a little bit other things. And that's just what you see in linear periodization. So the one standard that I could say that is across the board for majority of those sports. Now I have one for bench press in football, other things like, pull-ups in different sports, things like that. But for most athletes across the board, I use trap bar deadlift as a standard. Why? Because it trains that hip extension, right? I love the pattern. It's kind of a cross between a squat and hinge, I guess you could say, depending on, the anthropometrics of the actual athlete. But in any event, the transference, I believe, is extremely high, and you can look up some of the data and research on the actual lift. But the one thing that I look at between is roughly 2.2 to 2.6 times their body weight. Now, when an athlete reaches between that, what I'm able to say is, okay, we have a suffice amount of strength. If their broad jump, their speed, and their vertical jump is still low and they're meeting this metric of strength, then I know I can turn my focus more to transference. And what transference means is we start working down that force velocity curve, right? That speed, that strength speed continuum, to be able to display that strength in a little bit more, a little bit more twitchy, a little bit faster motion, right? So we can play with things such as triphasic training, such as different plyometrics and jump training, such as different med ball and power training. So we're moving that weight a little bit faster so that they can, again, most of the time, that those movements are expressed in a higher velocity, right? So instead of just focusing force, we move it down the chain into more velocity. I can't tell you how many guys I have that I've had come in here that will focus, strictly on strength, and they'll come in here and be the strongest guy, but they'll get the floor mopped on them when it comes to the jumping and to the running. And it's like, well, you don't lift on the field, you actually run and jump, and your actions are performed at a high velocity. So don't ever get so concentrated on something where it's like you're not becoming a better deadlifter, you're becoming a better athlete. So I'm kind of on a rant now and I'm just talking shit, but the biggest thing I wanted to be able to share was the mindset, because I think guys get so caught up in lift. It's not to say that we don't touch those. It's not to say that I don't have guys that absolutely explode past 2.2 and continue to climb. And even in other lifts too. Some guys are extremely strong in their squat. I let them go where their body will take them, and I set up the parameters for them to develop absolute strength. However, it doesn't become the focus once they meet a certain thing. The emphasis becomes, let's transfer it over. And that goes for almost any time of the periodization. If they come in and their absolute strength is off the board, doesn't mean that we won't maintain or keep that. It just means I know I got to turn my focus to immediately developing a little bit more as far as power and speed. So I hope that helps. I'm going to stop talking now, and I'll catch you guys next time.